Everyone, welcome to another episode of Dynasty Underdog. I'm your host, Uriah Dawkins, and with me tonight, Billy Beeman. What's going on, man?
Not much, man. Happy to be here with you. Happy to have you back. You pulled the old switcheroo on me last week, but me and Jake held it
Yeah.
down. And players are dropping like flies. We might get a little bit emotional just losing Chris Godwin like in the breakout season. Oh, what are we gonna do? What are we gonna do? But
I don't know. Cry.
let's hop into the
Not only
news and
that, but
nonsense, I guess.
yeah, let's talk through it. All right, so I mean, this is just like kind of well, maybe it doesn't seem so silly, but I was wondering, Brian Thomas Jr. over Marvin Harrison Jr. What are your thoughts on
The
that? Like, I
battle of
know,
the
like,
juniors. The
I
battle of the
know,
juniors. My quick answer is no.
yeah,
No, not Brian Thomas Jr. over Marvin Harrison Jr. He's playing great though. I mean, I love what we're seeing from Brian Thomas. I think Marvin Harrison Jr. He did have a concussion recently, so he's dealing with some stuff this season, getting acclimated with Kyler Murray, who seems like a quarterback who needs some time to build a rapport with his wide receivers, and you have Trey McBride there. There's just a lot more, I think, that Marvin Harrison Jr. is dealing with in Arizona than really Brian Thomas Jr. But I mean, truthfully, we thought that Brian Thomas Jr. was this guy. Like talking
yeah.
about Dynasty Underdog, the pod, like we were all on Brian Thomas Jr. We had no issues with him playing
Yes.
second fiddle to Malik Neighbors and all that stuff. So I'm not super shocked to see this. I do think, however, if we're even talking about this, it might be time to sell high on some of your Brian Thomas shares. I think I only have one, so I'll probably just write it out because I think he's going to be a good player regardless. I don't
Same.
think I think he'll still hit these big plays. I think he'll have these boom games, and I think he'll even become more of a steady player. But we are at a point where we're talking about evaluation of like the 102, 103 type deal in like a rookie draft. And so if you can swing him for, I don't know, I've seen some talk around like, oh, Brian Thomas Jr. for like AJ Brown types and stuff like that. Like if you can do something like that and you're not giving up too much, that might be a good bet. But again, I don't see a ton of reason to get off him, but his valuation's just skyrocketed. So I think that there's probably some opportunity to try.
Yeah, I agree with pretty much all that. And on the other end of things, I think maybe this is a time to try to go get some Marvin Harrison Jr. He's a good player.
Yeah,
He's just having a slow start. Right. So things will work out there. I mean, brighter futures ahead for him for sure. Absolutely. And I think I have like one share Brian Thomas Jr. and I'm just going to hold. Enjoy it. Right.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's not
Yeah.
like
I
this
don't think
huge like
there's
blow up
any.
like Puka last year where it cost you nothing, but all of a sudden like the return on investment was a bajillion. Like I would have sold a lot of Puka probably, but nonetheless. All right,
Yeah, and
Baker. This is a
truthfully,
big
I
one.
mean, sorry, before we move on, I do think that that's the most actionable information from this is by Marvin Harrison Jr.
Yes.
But truthfully, like in a move where you're trading Brian Thomas for AJ Brown or whatever, like, yeah, I think AJ Brown is more likely to give you steady high end production. But I don't know if you're giving up or if you're swapping to get that much more than what Brian Thomas can offer. Like he's pretty much the wide receiver one in this offense. I know that Evan Ingram is still probably the target hog short term, but long term, I don't think that's a problem. So like I feel like you need to be getting a pretty significant plus back and like a really valuable deal in return for Brian Thomas if you're going to move him right now is kind of my point.
I agree. All right, some sad news.
Oh, God.
So
Man,
of
I'm glad we
course,
started with
Mike Evans had
that.
coming into the week with a hamstring injury. He played anyway, got injured in the game. He's going to be out. He's going to be out. They say till at least week 11.
Mm-hmm.
And then at the very end of the game, Chris Godwin dislocated his ankle. His foot didn't look right. He's going to have surgery, probably be done for the year. Those are all sad things. We've dealt with this a lot this year. But what it also, in my opinion, how does it affect Baker? Like, I mean, a lot, right? That dude was
That's
having,
fun.
I mean, just one of the best. I mean, he looked pretty damn good last year. But he's just like, this year was just like, man, Baker can't stop. He's just balling. So now what do we do?
Yeah, Joe here legit teared up watching Godwin get hurt. He really was, finally breaking out to the level I think that most of us have expected in the past, like, in a year ago or so. But they really started utilizing him properly in this offense. And he was really shining. So yeah, it's really tough. But I think you bring up a great point with Baker. I don't think we're gonna see the high end production that we've seen from him thus far without these weapons, right? I mean, we're gonna see K. Dotton get a billion targets. We're gonna see Jalen McMillan for sure. I do think there's a potential. We were talking about this in the Discord. I do think there's some potential that we're hearing about Kupp on the block for the Cooper Kupp I'm speaking of on the block for the Rams. That seems like a great fit, and obviously great fits don't always work out necessarily, but they really are going to need some help, and they're a competitive team. So yeah, the trickle down effect is going to be pretty crazy. Like you're going to see a lot more work, I imagine, from Bucky and Rachaad White and that whole backfield. It's going to be a lot, but I don't know. I mean, I love Baker. I really do. I really like what he's become as a player, and I like his personality and all that. But I just wonder if, off this 30 whatever point game that he just had with the loss of these weapons, we know Mike Evans won't always be there. The injuries, Godwin, he's going to come back next year for sure. But what does it look like all for the future? Can we get out high on Baker is kind of what I'm wondering. Is there a way to just get out on him now? Or, I mean, people may just see it for what it is and know that he's lost his weapons and he's not going to be the same guy. I don't know, man. It's brutal, but we are going to get to see Jalen McMillan, and these guys get a lot of opportunities. So, I mean, the ancillary effects for our dynasty teams will be interesting and fun from that perspective. But yeah, this is just bad news all around.
All right. Of course.
Hopefully Kyler finds his courage again and remembers how to throw down the field. Joe, let's see.
I mean, he will. You just got to give it time. I think it's gonna be all right. I mean, the game that Cardinals played against the Seahawks. I mean, if you have free time, go back and watch what Kyler was doing. Mm-hmm. Just absolutely dealt. And then he posts on Twitter after the fact just the yawn emoji. I thought it was brilliant. So because he absolutely dealt. But yeah, moving on. Ayuk. So another one injured, really injured.
Dropping really like flies out here, man. What the hell?
Yeah. The zero running back guys are in shambles. But so yeah, he's out for the season. We'll see how that works out. Hopefully, guys like Pearsall and Cowing could step up. Debo gets over his pneumonia, and Brock Purdy could still steer the ship. But with Ayuk, 27 years old, having a down year, just off the top of your head, what would you sell for? What would you buy for?
Yeah, that's tough. I would sell for probably a first plus. I mean, I could see in if I'm rebuilding, I'd take a first probably, just any 25 first I'd be comfortable with. Man, that's tough. And again, like you said, 27 years old. He's a little bit older, been underproductive. What's going to happen when he comes back? I mean, he obviously got his deal, so good for him before the injury. This is why he pushed for the deal, clearly. Man, what would I buy for? I mean, I'd probably push it and try to send 2 seconds and get him, something like that.
If you were rebuilding and you had T on your team, Higgins, would you send Higgins for Ayuk and try to get something plus?
Probably not. I mean,
probably not. Is that an age thing?
It's both an age thing, and I also Higgins is probably going to move on and be the wide receiver one somewhere else. So I just feel like his dynasty value is going to increase from here, where Ayuk's obviously is going to increase from the injury, but I think it's going to probably plateau at back where it was, and if not, slowly decline after that. Though, maybe I'm putting too much stake into the injury. Honestly, we do that. So I don't want to hit him too hard for that because he's still a great player and he's going to come back from this. It's probably going to be pretty good. And Debo might not be there, so he might have an elevated role too. You know what I mean? Trying to kind of look into the future a little bit. But yeah, I mean, it depends on the plus. I guess, T for Ayuk and what? Is a second the top you're going to get on top of him?
Yeah, I think so.
man. I mean, I'd be fine, I guess, but like as a rebuilder, it's probably a fine move. Honestly, as a rebuilder, it's probably a good move.
Get T off your team, grab Ayuk for later, and then a little pick for this upcoming draft.
Yeah,
I think I'd probably do something like that.
Yeah, I don't think it's a bad move. I actually saw somebody in a chat trying to sell Ayuk for a competitor, not a rebuilder, a competitor trying to sell Ayuk for McLaurin or Diggs range. Like just I think straight up, which is pretty wild to me. Like the Diggs thing, that one is a little. It's just the longevity's not there. I'd want more, exactly. Yeah. The McLaurin one straight up, like obviously I'd be fine with getting the McLaurin side as a competitor and moving off of Ayuk. But yeah, that's a really tough one. Jake here got AC at about 1.25. So that's Amari Cooper at about 1.25 firsts. I'm assuming that's Amari Cooper, right? Yeah. Okay. Oh, he's in the chat trying to make a deal with Joe. That's probably what that's about. I love it. I love it. That's hilarious. Yeah, that's probably a good price for Amari Cooper. But yeah, this is just brutal for Ayuk. I would try to be buying under a first, and I would be trying to sell for over a first is pretty much where I'm at. Otherwise, I think you're okay just kind of holding because I do think this, he'll be back eventually, and somebody is going to be interested at that point. But man, it's such a brutal situation for this guy who, again, like the age isn't that much. I mean, 28, he's going to have at least 2 or 3 years of production left in him. So I hate this, man. This season sucks.
Yeah. All right. Moving on to something good. Deshaun of the nice. Deshaun of
this
the
is good. This is good. I guess it depends on your perspective.
The way you wrote it, Deshaun of the dead. So yeah, Deshaun Watson tore his Achilles, trying to rush with the ball, went down, hurt his shit, out for the year. So a couple questions. I mean, we don't really have to talk about how it affects his weapons because he wasn't doing shit with his weapons in the first place.
Apparently, we don't even need to discuss them in a positive way.
It doesn't matter. But do we think he gets another chance? And would you buy for anything? I do think he gets another chance. Like, say he comes back and rehabs, like he'll probably end up starting sometime next year for the Browns. I think contractually they kind of have to, but I don't care. I don't care. He wasn't good. I mean, you try to like separate the off-field shit with like your fantasy shit just a little bit, but he was bad in both. So it's like
he's bad in real life and bad in fantasy and bad on the football field.
He just doesn't have it anymore. So would I buy him for anything? Absolutely not.
No, like so if you could, okay, if you could,
like if he becomes like a career backup. No, if he becomes like a career backup or something, like he might be one of those guys where I'm gonna go, I need to fill in, or one of my guys goes down and like he's next man up. Like I might send a third for like some spot starts, but I'm completely out. He's never looked good, not once.
No, I mean that's fair, and I don't think he did not look good. I'm not over here being like, oh, he was great. I think he has a terrible offensive line. I think he had a terrible, and honestly, maybe they didn't want to play for him because it sure seemed like it the way they let him get beat up all year.
Turnstile.
Yeah, literally. But that said, I think I would be willing to send a third now because, like, if you're willing to send a third for spot starts at some point, you may as well just send a third now because he's probably going to at least increase his value to a second just by starting at some point for the Browns, like, which I do think he's going to, like you said, contractually, and just because it ended this way with the Achilles injury, they'll probably draft a quarterback, bring a guy in and have some kind of like competition going on or whatever, and give him the vet start or whatever. So I think that we are going to see a rebound, even if it's small, in dynasty value. Maybe I'm just a glutton for punishment. Probably am. I think Uriah is.
We play this game, so
yeah, true. But I think Uriah is probably right on this one. But I do think there's a world that it turns around a little bit and I do think people are going to be willing, Achilles injury, like you said, terrible guy, terrible football player. Let me just get off of him. If you might be able to get him for less than a fourth, if you just give it some time. So, yeah, that one's ugly. And I made probably a trade or two for him this off season. And, I feel terrible about it right now.
It's okay. It's what we're here for. All right. Mark Andrews, he gets right, but is his role still wrong? You have a tweet here up from Jacob Gibbs.
Yes. And pretty much indicating that the last time his route participation was below 78% was in 2019. His rate sits at 59% in 2024. His target rate is way down too. Targets per outrun rate by season, 25%, 25%, 26%, 22%, and then in 2024, 16%, way down. And I think that it kind of makes sense. This is the first time that they've actually had decent weapons outside of Mark Andrews, to be honest. They have Zay Flowers, they have Isaiah Likely, who's kind of coming into his own. Rashad Bateman maybe getting. I put him in there. Rashad Bateman getting, a little. now you're making me not want to say it, but improving a little bit, and clearly it's showing up on the field. Like he this last game he looked great. Some really big downfield catches, but that said, I do think that what has happened is Mark Andrews has slowly gotten healthier and healthier throughout the season. He looks like he's moving better, and he's able to produce in this offense. He's able to, I think they're more willing to use them. They probably are talking about this kind of stuff on the side. I'm sure Lamar Jackson knows that he's feeling better. He clearly looks like he's moving better on the field, and I think that he's going to get more involved because of that. And the target volume is probably not going to be there, but in the red zone, he's looking for him. In high quality, high value situations, he's looking for him. So I'm not, like I have all season long, been saying just patience with this guy. And I do think it's paying off. We are seeing him come around, and the specific role we've seen in the past may not be there ever again. But I truly believe Mark Andrews is one of the premier tight ends in this league who is going to demand targets. And we're seeing that. I just think he wasn't healthy early in the season. So I don't think the role is necessarily wrong. I think that it's just more conducive to what the Ravens are doing now with all these weapons, including Derrick Henry. I forgot to mention him, right? But they have a much better run game, a guy who they're willing to pass the ball to more. Justice Hill, another guy who they're willing to pass the ball to more out of the backfield because he's being very successful with the ball in his hands. So I think it's a little bit of a product of being in a much better offense. The ball is going to be spread around a little bit. But are you worried about the role at all? Or are you feeling okay about Mark Andrews?
I'm not, and I'm assuming this is like compiled from week 1 through week 7, and we all know that he started really slow. So I'd like to see what that was over the last 2 weeks. Last 2 weeks, it might be a little bit better.
Let me check.
It just looks like I think I'm going to agree with you. I think that since you were saying from the beginning, I think that he just wasn't quite healthy. But now you can see that he's starting to kind of get there. So a shout out to all those who got Mark Andrews when people left him for dead. So it's paying off for you a little bit. All right.
Absolutely. I'm going to look up those the numbers for the last 2 weeks, but move on and I'll let you know when I get it.
Yeah. So Breast Bus, I'll eat crow. Actually, it's funny. The reactions on Twitter are so fast. It's like, oh man, Russell Wilson, like what, he came out and didn't look the greatest, like for the first 10 minutes. Right. But then he went on and he led that offense to a very nice victory there. It seemed like the connection that Russell Wilson had with Pickens is kind of the type of ball that George Pickens is really going to feast on, that moon ball that he likes to throw. Yeah, man. I mean, I'm always going to stick up for Justin Fields. I don't know why. Just something about him. Maybe it's just his personality and the type of person I am. I'll just always stand for people like that. Like Baker Mayfield. I have not once wavered. I love Baker Mayfield and I love Justin Fields. But I do think that Mike Tomlin made the right choice there for that team. It looks like the offense is going to be a whole lot better with Russell Wilson.
Yeah, that's a reasonable take. And I understand having some affection for Justin Fields. I think that he really presents himself well. You can see that he carries himself well. He understands where he's at, that he's made mistakes, that he hasn't been the best for the team. And he, like I talked last week with Jake, he took it on the chin, and I thought he was really mature in his response to being benched on a team that was winning, which is got to be a tough pill to swallow for anybody, So I respect Justin Fields. I would love to see him succeed, and I'm hoping that he gets better backing up Russ. And next time he sees the field, hopefully he is the guy. Russ didn't look amazing, but he looked better than I think people expected. I think this offense is really better for him than what he was working with in the past over in Denver. Like, I really think this offense is so much more conducive to the player he is. And you saw once he got settled in, he was able to, I think, dial in a little bit. And, like you said, there's moonshots to Pickens. So, I think all the pass catchers get a plus from Russ. We'll see how long it lasts. But I do think, with the run game they have and with the receivers they have, that he's probably going to be okay for the rest of the season here. We should probably be selling though. Like, we should probably be selling some Russ, because like it can be really, I don't know, it can go downhill fast, and all it'll take is a couple games where he throws a pick or two, or he's losing, and Justin Fields is back in, and now his value is tanked again. So as much as I've been caping for Russ over the past year, I do think that I'd be willing to move off of him, and probably for any first round pick I can get, I'll just take it and run, because that was so far fetched to think of a week ago. If you can get a couple seconds and you're not like super in dire needs of a quarterback, then just do it. That's how I feel about it.
Yeah, it seems like a really volatile player to have right now. Just plain and simple. Which same with Justin Fields. All right, last of our nonsense here, but yeah, Sleeper, good platform. Made the switch this last year, and it's been pretty decent for us. But they did add a FAAB suggestion with the players. So like you have players that are available, setting your waivers, and then it had a range like $10 to $15 for your FAAB. People all went up in arms about it on the old Twitter box today. I don't really care. Like, I'm not going to use their FAAB suggestions to make my bids. I never will. But it might be easier for like maybe more casual players and stuff like that don't have a huge network of people that they talk to, or don't have time to read the articles or whatever. Like, I like the fact that they tried doing something like that, which is cool. I just don't understand where they got those values, or you know what I mean? Like, where did they come from? It's kind of the thing. So it's like, I just went through a couple players and just like, man, that doesn't seem quite right. But all in all, I don't really care. I mean, if it's there, use it. If you like it, have fun with it. It would be cool if it showed you, like, if it did some actual more work for you, like league specific, and it showed you like the average that your teammates FAAB that they would spend on players like this, and then you could kind of gauge what you would need to spend to get that player. I know that's doing a whole ton of work for you, but that feature would be cool.
Yeah, no, definitely that feature would, I think, be more helpful, because what it's seemingly doing is looking through every league and what the FAAB was that was spent on them, and I'm sure giving some sort of average and then a range in between, like the high and low or something like that. It would be more valuable if it was league specific and it was like what the average person spends on a player that is within that like ADP range or whatever, waiver range or something like that. Definitely it would be more helpful for the users that want it. Sleeper immediately pulled this thing back and was like, we unveiled this. We unveiled this way too quick. Clearly people didn't want it, and we're going to make it a toggleable feature where you can turn it on and off depending on your league. And I think that's the best way to do it, because for like newer dynasty leagues, stuff like that, or people who are new, like just implementing FAAB for the first year, like maybe you want that. Maybe you do want a little bit of help from, the Sleeper AI. But for more established leagues, I don't know. It just seems like a little too much information or too much work being done for the manager. Like, you should be making these decisions without assistance, is kind of how I feel like. But also I wonder if there's a way to kind of leverage it if it is being used in your league, because people are going to look at it and say, okay, well, I need to, if the high is 20, I need to go at least 21 to spend on this guy, right? Or that might be just the range where people settle in, like around, somewhere 18 to 22. And like, you can know, like, all right, well, I'm just going to put 40 in, and like probably nobody's going to bid over because they're thinking that this thing is correct. So I wonder if there's kind of a way to leverage it and use it against your league mates that may not be as savvy. I don't know. I'm always looking for those little edges. So I do think that this is one of those where you can potentially use against your league mates. So something to think about, if your league ends up implementing it, think about the ways that you can kind of use it to work, against, or essentially use it against your league mates. So that's where my brain went. Yes.
Cool. All right, so we are through week 7. Basically, for most of our dynasty leagues, about halfway to the playoffs, plus or minus, right? So, just real quickly, want to say, how are we feeling about our teams? What are we going to do about where we're at? Things that we want to look at is how many points for, points against, your max points for, etc., not just your record. What are some things you're doing right now to evaluate your teams?
Yeah, I mean, I think finding tools that help do this for you in a way where you're not having to look through each league and go to the standings and go, let me see how much max points for them, go to the details, this, that, and the other. Like, I do think going to, Dynasty Daddy, connecting your leagues into there and just being able to see kind of where you stand based on like the power rankings, which does a lot of this for you, can show you, the max points for all that different stuff. I think that that's a really good way to go gauge kind of where you're at. But I mean, it's interesting. Like, if you see that you have a team that's like top 4, right, in a league, but you're like 8th in max points or 8th in points for, does that sway you in a certain direction? Like, do you think that you're going to tell yourself this team doesn't really have the juice, they're more fraudulent than they are true contenders?
Yeah, and I think that's what's important about it, right? So we've talked about this before, probably yearly now, but that's exactly what you need to use those tools for. I know this is kind of repetitive for a lot of people that have been listening for a while or more established, but if you're a little bit newer, it's really important to not just look at your record right now. You need to know if you've been kind of getting lucky. Have you been setting like the optimal lineup every single week and just like squeaking by? Like, little things like that matter, right? If I'm sitting at like 5th in the league, but I've had like the most points scored against me, like I'm a little more inclined to like not start selling right now. I'm a little more inclined to kind of wait out for a little bit, right? And I'm there in a lot of different leagues. I'm in the no man's land in a lot of different leagues, but there's for different reasons. A lot of them are because I've been playing against people who've been scoring the highest every single week. And there's times where I have a record right now that is completely fraudulent because I've been playing against like 3 tinking teams. That's the thing in Dynasty, you got to worry. Like in Dynasty, you're always going to have like at least 2 teams who are trying to tank. They're not trying to win. And if you played both of those guys, like those 2 wins aren't actual real. So you really need to think about that right now. And I think after week 7 is a perfect time to do it. So that's all.
No, yeah, I think that's a great answer. And I definitely agree with you. I think the way you lay that out, especially like if you're in the middle and, you have most points against you and you're pretty competitive in points for, like, yeah, no reason to panic. You were dealt a pretty bad hand in terms of scheduling, and you're hoping that shifts over the second half of the year, right? Which is totally reasonable. I have, just for an example of something a little bit different, we're in this league that I started this year with some buddies from back home. You're in it, Dynasty League of Legends. And I started this league off with I still have no running backs. My starting running back is Jaleel McLaughlin. I'm in 3rd place though. And I have some guys coming off PUP like Hawkinson, and I have one of the higher max points for, one of the higher points for. And my team was kind of, I think I'm like 4-2 or whatever. It wasn't really hitting on all cylinders the first couple weeks, and really was making me think, man, maybe this is like a rebuild type team, But now where I'm at, I'm thinking, okay, maybe I consider adding to this team down the road, not making too many moves because clearly I'm in a pretty good spot. But since I don't have a running back, maybe I go and spend a 3rd round pick on a usable running back to kind of better fill or at least backfill the thinnest spot on my roster. So that's just another kind of activity or way to, actionably look at your teams and say, like, what can I do going forward to either help this team, or do I need to do anything going forward? But I think really, we've talked about optimizing already good rosters. So this is a pretty good roster, but I'm thinking, is there a cheap way to better optimize this roster for the second half of the season stretch run, right? So there's a lot of different ways to do this. Obviously, if you're a rebuilder, you're going to think in those terms, whatever, but just kind of a live example of one of the ones where I looked at and I was like, this is kind of surprising where I'm at. I didn't expect this. And here's some things I can do going forward. Do you think when you're looking at, like, we just talked through a bunch of injuries, right? The Mike Evans, Chris Godwin's, all that. Does knowing that top end contenders in your league are suffering injuries like this make you push more for the playoffs if you're in like the 5-6 range, or do you not really care what's happening to the other teams? Do you just more focused on yours?
Me personally, just be more focused on mine, unless it was one, like, it would depend on the league, I guess, and where I was. But typically, I was thinking about that kind of from a different spot. Like, say you are sitting at like 5th in your league, and you're just pretty much average, right? Average points for, average points against, but you have Cooper Kupp and Hollywood Brown on IR, and Jonathan Brooks on taxi. Like, if you didn't have those and you're kind of middling, it'd be a good time to start like positioning for your rookie pick, right? The sooner you do it, the better. Mm-hmm. But I think in that situation, I'm like, hey man, I got reinforcements coming, and that might be kind of like pie in the sky, fool's gold thing, just assuming they're going to come back and help you. But like, there's hope there. So I think in that situation, if I'm sitting 5th in the league, everything else pretty much average, but I have those guys that like are going to come back and like help me out, I think I'm still like rolling with it and trying to do what I can to like better my roster and try to make that push, because getting somebody like Cooper Kupp or Hollywood Brown back, and then Jonathan Brooks, depending on what he may or may not be, like, there's hopium there. So I think that would prevent me from like trying to start selling off.
That's an interesting perspective and a good way to look at it. Like, I do have teams like that too, where I have Brooks and I have like a fairly competitive roster, and I'm like, man, if a couple of these guys just come off of a pup and off IR and hit at the right time, then we're going to be good. So I was actually talking to Jake, and I said to him, I was like, I think patience is an edge right now in Dynasty. And because what I'm seeing is a lot of people are making redraft type moves, which obviously you have to make sometimes in Dynasty. I'm not just trying to crap on that strategy necessarily, because there are going to be redraft moves that you need to make or want to make to compete. But in general, I'm seeing it happen, whether you're a competitor or a rebuilder. And I just feel like sometimes if you like, especially right now with how much movement's going on, mistakes can be made really easily with all these movements. Being patient and tactical, like really, really taking your time and making sure that the moves you're making are the right moves. I think that's a really good strategy right now with how reactionary the community is. So I think we're only halfway through. There's still some time left. If you're not, at the bottom with a terrible, points for, max points for, and you see some hope there, I think you can still stretch it out a little bit. We've obviously talked about, choosing a lane, which I think you had to have some foresight a couple weeks ago to do that. But now where we're at, I think you can have some patience and you can leverage the trade deadlines. If as a rebuilder, there's some milestones coming up in the season that you can really make moves. But I do think being patient right now is really important, especially like Uriah saying, if you have some reinforcements coming because of how the season has gone, the Pukas, the Cups, the Brooks, Pearsall now probably going to be coming off your taxi squad. Like, you got some guys coming in who are probably going to help and be impactful for your team. Before we move on here, quick question from Jake. How do you prepare against the super team tag? Do you shut up shop, or do you understand the weekly variance and keep your head down? That's interesting. So, I mean,
how do you prepare the super team tag?
Yeah, I'm wondering if, and maybe you can clarify, if this is like, if your team has the super team tag, do you like not do anything, or do you understand weekly variance and keep your head down? But I'm assuming that it's a super team in your league. Like you go on Dynasty Daddy and you see there's a super team in your league. Maybe you're still, middling like 4th, 5th place or something like that. Do you just shut it down and you're like, forget it, this guy's going to win? Or do you understand the weekly variance and keep your head down? Personally, for me, I think I lean more on the second side of that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what do you say here? No team in the league has the super team tag in Dynasty Daddy. Now you're confusing me. But let's see what you said. That's a good question. How do you get over the psychological barrier of going up against a super team? That's how I am interpreting it.
Yeah,
that's how I'm interpreting it. And that's where I'm going to run with. So for me, though, I will say I'm literally in a league like this. And Paul Patterson, our good friend of the show, Pure Potential YouTube channel, he has a really good team in this league. I'm in with him, like one that's favored to win the league, could be considered a super team, whatever. But for me, again, this is kind of part of the patience thing. Like, you obviously have to be honest with yourself and understand, like, does my team really not have the juice? And so I that's hard to do. It's hard to be honest with yourself, but I think you can do that. I think that you can reasonably look at your roster and be like, no chance. But on teams where I have like really high scoring weeks, where I still have really good competitive points for, max points for, whatever, I think I'm just going to try to ride it out and try to compete with these teams, because I do think the weekly variance is a real thing. There's still plenty of injuries that can happen, just like we've seen, right? All it takes is 1 or 2 of these injuries to one of their stud players, and now the playing field is leveled. So I don't think that it's necessarily smart to just like pack up shop and go home and call it a day, unless you are bottom half of the league. Like, at that point, you aren't going to compete with these guys. You're just not. So yeah, pack up shop and move on to the next season, call it a day. Actually, in that league, somebody today just literally put like their entire team on the block, including guys like CeeDee Lamb, yada, yada, yada. So it's going to happen. And I think that is when you can take advantage of those teams and maybe get better in the hunt. Yeah, get better, optimize that already good team. And now you're closer to a super team. So I do think what happens is we see some people that don't need to close up shop do it, and they become vulnerable to attacks like this. And you just need to be able to get ahead of it and make sure that super team doesn't get ahead of it first and add to their super team, because these are smart players. They're going to want to optimize their already good teams too, and they're going to want to stop you from getting the good players. So you still need to remain competitive. You still need to pay attention, and I don't think that it's really a time to pack it up and go home if you are in like the top 4 or 5 range with like a really competitive points for and your team's good.
That's exactly how I feel. I mean, if you're a playoff team, let's say you're a playoff team, you're not like, I might make the playoff team. You're like, you are a playoff team. Then it's whatever. Week to week, anything can happen. So as I say all the time, the football is oblong. It's not round. So weird shit happens all the time. So yeah, just
I love that. I love that saying, by the way.
Well, it is. It doesn't bounce right.
It's true. Weird shit.
So yeah, I mean, if you're an actual playoff team, I don't care if somebody's got a whole lot better roster. It's not going to scare me. I'm going to go out there and compete every day. Coach speak. We're going to go out there and we're going to compete and we're going to practice and blah, blah.
you tell that
otherwise you're just going to do the same thing next year and just keep like selling off players and giving up way too early. You got to go for it sometimes.
Yeah. And it's funny. Like, I'll just say, I do think that sometimes like the dynasty daddies and stuff like that negatively work against us in a way, because they sometimes give us like too much information, or these labels that we like hold on to too much, where it's like, oh fuck, a super team is in my league. Well, that's it, we're done. And it's like, if you didn't have dynasty daddy, would you look at that team the same way, or would you tell yourself maybe that team is playing over their head a little bit? This combination of players can't sustain this success all year long. This guy is dealing with a sore Achilles, and it could pop any day now. Like, I think you would just look at these teams through a different psychological lens. And now that we have more tools to prepare us and show us and categorize things, like I do think that sometimes it can work against us if we're not careful. Last piece here from Jake, and we'll move on. Yes, Bill, you hit the nail on the head with the tagging issues. Maybe the algo doesn't feed into valuation for scoring properly too. That's a good point. Maybe it's not taking in your scoring settings, right? Maybe you have a unique league that has points per first down and blah, 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 all these other things. Is Dynasty Daddy really taking all that into account, or are they just, which they are actually, we know what they're using. They're using keep trade cut values or their own valuation of some sort of the player to kind of put those in a bucket and aggregate things for you. So yeah, that's a great point. Really, really great point. Yeah, awesome. All right, we can move on.
All right, moving on. So oversaturation. Are there players we get exposed to with narratives that they become nearly impossible to buy or sell? So I'm taking this as, are these players that we bought into too much early or were overhyped? Like, say, I know, for example, former DFF Winks. He was a
Ben Winkler, yes.
Yeah, tons of AD Mitchell, right? So, I mean, he can speak for himself, but from what I could see, from what he's posted, like, he went all in on AD Mitchell. And now he's sitting in a situation where, like, he has a ton of AD Mitchell, and I don't know a whole lot of people are, like, rushing out to go buy him right now just because of the season he's had so far. And his quarterback kind of sucks. So yeah, that's kind of how I think.
You think I'm gonna let that slide? Wow, you just try to slide that in there. Oh, okay, yeah, he's been pretty bad. I can't lie. He's been.
I blame you. I bought into him because of you, but
you blame Ben. Blame Ben. We're blaming Ben.
Not AD Mitchell. I bought into AR, but
yeah, well, he was the original AR truther, just so you know. So blame him.
Oh, okay. But yeah, so we have Dontavian Wicks, which is like, we were oversaturated by social media, and just everyone's like, hey, Wicks. You know, Dubs had his thing, and Watson was injured, and whatever, right? And the Packers were dealing, and everybody ended up with a bunch of Wicks that they probably don't want right now.
Exactly, right? And I think that's yeah, absolutely. You're nailing it. And this is exactly kind of where I was coming from with this. I think, you know, oversaturation, as I like to call it sometimes. Some of these players. So we talk all about the stats over and over and over again, and it's so hard to, once we're overexposed to them as a community, sometimes it's hard to do anything with these players, move them in any way, sell them or buy them. And I think we talked about Wicks one of these past weeks, which really I think created this topic for us. That's where I got it from. And I was thinking, are there other players like Wicks who are talked about so much that they're just not really acquirable? And I think AD Mitchell's a good one. You mentioned that, like another really good one where all the off-field issues or potential off-field issues, not that there were any really, but you know, his character concerns, we'll say. And then, you know, AR can't hit him, and he's the third wide receiver and all the different narratives going around. And it's just like, Jake and I have been trying to buy this guy all over the place for the first 7 weeks and can't get a deal done. Can't buy him low, can't sell him high. There's nothing you can do. There's just nothing seemingly possible to do with these assets. And so I wanted to see if there was a couple other ones that we can talk about and talk through. I think Jalen McMillan is another one constantly talked about. Now, maybe I had this in my notes before the injuries. So
it doesn't really help now, does it?
Yeah, it doesn't really help now necessarily. And maybe you can sell him high, but still it's like, do we really know what we want to buy him for at this point? Do we know what we're going to get? So is anybody actually going to buy him high until they see what he's done? And before this, it was just constantly, you know, I think there was a lot of discussions around, you know, when we're going to see him. When we did see him, he was pretty good. And so it's just that the oversaturation of narratives that I think hits us in the community that makes it tough to buy these guys. I see it with Eric All too, who I think has been tough to add into deals. He's been even as an add-on, people really, they like the profile. Now it's possible, like obviously every one of these players I'm sure has been sold week, 1 through 7, but I just find that it's harder to do with some of these guys that we talk about constantly. Kamani Vidal is another one that I think we've talked about all offseason heading up into the season. He didn't match the expectations, and then we see him do well, and we're talking about him again, but it's like, I don't think anybody actually believes what they saw, because now, we've seen another week where J.K. Dobbins really led the show. And it's like, it's constantly back and forth with these guys. And I think the best example of all is going to be JSN, right? And we have a tweet that just came out, I think yesterday, or I don't know, maybe it was like last week. I don't know, it was a while ago. But if the season ended today, Jackson Smith and Jigba's range of outcomes would consist of 0% achieving an 18 plus point per game season, 20% achieving 16 plus points per game per season, and 27% achieving 14 plus points per game season. And yet he's still valued as a top 24 wide receiver. But what's funny about that is I don't think that you're able to sell him for a first or buy him low. Like I haven't seen, you know what I'm saying? Like I haven't seen any of that happen.
I feel like there's a lot of stubbornness with us dynasty players, and because we spend a lot of time with them before they see the NFL field. That's part of our job as dynasty managers, is to kind of get to know these kids before they're even selected to the NFL and are on a team. And then if they end up going somewhere where we think that there's even more potential, we already said they're pretty good. Man, I like this kid as a prospect. Oh, now he's somewhere like I like. It could take weeks. It could take a whole season of underperforming before somebody's going to move off that player. JSN, it's taken a season and a half. And folks are still like, hey, JSN, wide receiver 1, or probably 2.
2?
and the
we moved the goalpost a little bit. Moved the goalpost.
I was trying to remember. It was Addison, QJ, JSN. So yeah, JSN, wide receiver 1. Folks aren't going to let off of that. Like most folks aren't going to let off of that very easy. I think probably portfolio dynasty players are way more easy to like ship them off. But if you have like 6 or 7 leagues or whatever, like you're kind of a normal dynasty player, you might only have one JSN, and you're not going to move off of him,
right?
Because he's a good player. He was a good player before he saw an NFL field, and you just know, hey, DK Metcalf, he's hurt now. We didn't mention that. DK Metcalf is going to be out for a little bit. I jinxed him because I was talking about how healthy he's been before the game started yesterday. My bad. But it just, we're stubborn. We all fall in love with these players because we spend time with them before they end up on the NFL field. And so it takes either a really unattached dynasty manager who's just willing to move based off value and forget the name to make the moves to get off these players before they've lost a lot of value. If I had JSN, I'm probably trying not to sell him either because I think he's going to be good. Like Tyler Lockett's not going to be there, and that's always going to be the back of your mind. Tyler Lockett's going to be gone. Tyler Lockett's going to be gone. I'm going to hold JSN until it happens. Kamani Vidal, another guy you mentioned. J.K. Dobbins, always hurt. Gus, slow, washed. It's going to be Kamani Vidal season at some point. This could be 1 year from now, and it could be 1 year from now, and they've drafted another running back. And then now you're stuck with Kamani Vidal, who's not doing anything for you. But that's just the situation. That's just like a reality. I get what you're saying here. I don't know an answer to like combat this besides just trying to remove the name and just look at what they've done.
Yeah.
Look at what they've done. Look at the box score. Look at their peripherals, and then make your decision based on just the numbers. If you could do that, if you could separate the name and the numbers, you can make these moves a lot easier.
I think that's good advice, and I'll add look at the film a little bit too. But I think that's good advice, and
film.
I don't film. Like I don't know if there's necessarily like specific actionable advice for these specific group of players we're talking about. But I did want to get out the psychological aspect of like the oversaturation effect that happens, and not to like be discouraged by trying to go out for these guys and not getting stuff done, or trying to sell them not getting stuff done. I think you have to understand where we're at in the dynasty cycle, and that they're in this specific space where the narratives have kind of taken over, and we need to wait for things to die down a little bit, or you need to find really creative ways to get deals done for these players. That's the other thing. It won't just be, I'm going to go send, a second round pick for JSN like that. That's just not going to happen. He's not, it hasn't gone, the dip hasn't gone that far, and it's not going to go that far because of everything you said with Lockett, with Metcalf, with the volume's still there. The targets are there. He's not doing what we want with them, but it hasn't gotten bad enough to where anybody wants to sell low. So it's like, yeah, would you take a first for him? Sure. But is anybody trying to send a first for him right now? No, nobody is. They're trying to buy lower than that, and it ain't going to happen. So you need to find creative ways to get it done if you want to get it done. And that may be, maybe that's attacking the Brandon Ayuk situation. If you want to get off of JSN, maybe you can convince the Brandon Ayuk owner to make that swap and even get a plus back or something like that, or just make that swap because you think Brandon Ayuk is simply a better player and he's not nearly as good. That's not the route I would take, but I'm just thinking of like more creative ways to get these kind of deals done. That said, in the same vein, and here's where we may be able to get a little more actionable. What about the opposite? Like, who isn't being talked about at all that maybe we should be targeting? Because we're talking about players who are overspoken about, right? They're just there's oversaturation of their name, of statistics, whatever. What about guys that just we aren't talking about anymore? And one that came to mind was Keaton Mitchell, because we're seeing how effective this run game is in Baltimore. Justice Hill is not necessarily part of that specific facet of the game. He's more an extension of the receiving game. And obviously they're going to ride Derrick Henry. There's always opportunity for him to be injured, but also I think that Keaton Mitchell may just find a nice little role for himself. He's a big play guy. Maybe he takes over the Justice Hill role eventually. And for the future, that may be what they want. And we saw some pretty good things from Keaton Mitchell. So that's one that stood out to me. Do you agree, disagree? And is there anybody else that you're thinking of maybe?
So Keaton Mitchell, I like the idea, but right, he is undrafted, right? Undrafted free agent.
Yep.
And his knee bent this way.
Yeah, his knee did hyperextend, correct.
I like the idea of what you're going here, the type of player, the type of profile where you have an injured player who showed us he's really good, but like nobody's talking about him because he's on IR. He's injured, right? But he will be back eventually. Keaton Mitchell, I don't have a whole lot of faith in their draft capital, etc., stuff like that. So I don't know, but I do like your second one.
Jake has them all over, so too bad.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's possible. I mean, Keaton Mitchell might end up being a thing. I like the profile to attack. I like that type of player, just maybe not that name. But the next one, Ben Sinnott. I do like Ben Sinnott. Like, he's there's a faction of the dynasty community that's Ben Sinnott truthers. You're president. I understand that, but it's good. He's behind a really old ass
conductor.
And this offense is a whole lot better than we predicted it would be at the beginning of the year. So I think there is a situation where you could get a Ben Sinnott at a reasonable cost. And I think it's a smart thing to do because Zach Ertz isn't the future tight end of this team. That's just reality, right? So if Zach Ertz plays next year, it's probably going to be for another team. And then Ben Sinnott will have a chance to be the tight end one, assuming they don't draft anybody else. I think he has all the tools to be that guy. So I think that the lesser talked about player like Ben Sinnott is someone good to target. Along with the next guy, Marshawn Lloyd.
Yeah.
He's in a situation where he's playing behind Jacobs right now, and AJ Dillon's on IR. Marshawn Lloyd's going to have a chance to shine at some point, I believe. And nobody's really talking about him. I think he's also a good target. What do you think about Marshawn Lloyd and Sinnott? I kind of skipped over you.
Yeah, no, please, you're good. You're rolling. I like those two a lot. Obviously, I love Ben Sinnott. He only had 2 catches on 2 targets this past week, but he did score a touchdown. So I think things are slow. The tides are slowly turning. And I remember seeing Paul Patterson, again, shout out, on Twitter say, anybody before this, it was like 2 weeks ago, maybe. Anyone remember Ben Sinnott? And so the idea that he is not being talked about, that was basically saying like it ain't happening for him. You know what I mean? That was kind of what he was alluding to, type thing. Like, yeah, we're not talking about him anymore, right? Because he was the big guy pre-draft. But again, we know this about tight ends. They take time. They're not all Brock Bowers. Like, that's not how it works. They're not all Sam Laporta. Yeah, I mean, yeah, Brock, man, whew, that's next level stuff. They're amazing, but they're not all that guy. So I think it's a great one because he's not being talked about. Marshawn Lloyd, literally, I have not heard his name anywhere for weeks, weeks, maybe since like week 1 or 2 when he was potentially coming back off the injury or whatever. But then he's not even practicing yet, so we're still not going to hear about him for a couple of weeks. Josh Jacobs is fine, but he's not, overly impressive right now. Like, it's just not. And so they have Emmanuel Wilson behind him, who they've given touches to, and I think a lot of those touches are going to go to Marshawn Lloyd when he's back. And I've had my issues with Marshawn Lloyd's like vision and whatnot, but he's a really athletic guy. That stuff can improve. I'm interested. I'm really interested, and I think he's one of those guys who you could potentially get for really, really cheap. Throw him most leagues, you can throw them back onto your taxi squad once you get them. Even if not, I think he's good. I think he's a cheap option. You throw him on the IR and just wait till he comes back and see what happens. But I want to attack those profiles that nobody's talking about because I think they're going to be cheaper than most.
Yeah, I think you could add Jalen Wright to that too. That's another guy that I'm still interested in. I think he fits the offense perfectly. But Jalen Wright just hasn't quite had all the opportunities yet, but they're coming. I feel like they're coming. So he's another dude that I think fits perfectly with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, I'm interested in where your head's at on this last one we have here, Marquise Brown. I know you mentioned him earlier, but I'm wondering, does this guy even make it back in season?
It was a shoulder, right?
It was a collarbone, and he had surgery on it.
I broke my collarbone. I was back in 6 weeks.
Wow! All right,
back on the playing field, bud. No, I love
Uriah recovers faster than NFL athletes. This guy is just a beast.
I was 9, so they heal quick. And I didn't need no surgery, bum. No, I do like it. I mean, I guess I wish I knew more about his potential return timetable. But if he comes back by, I don't know, week 9 or something, game on, right? I mean, if fully healthy, ready to hit the field, week 9, you get another 5 usable weeks, 4 usable weeks before. No, yeah, 5 usable weeks, 6 usable weeks before the playoffs start. Come on, yeah. I think we've been robbed to not be able to see what that looks like in the offense. Like, I mean, look at poor Patrick Mahomes. He's getting benched for like Baker Mayfield in your dynasty roster. So I think I am excited about Marquise Brown. Price, I'm really curious what he's going for right now.
Let's see real quick on Keep Trade Cut. I'm kind of just trying to figure out like when he's going to be back, but the reports were that he could potentially be back towards the end of the season. So yeah. I don't know if we're talking week 9, it might be a little bit longer than that, if at all. But even so, I do think that Brown is a good football player, and this is not going to prevent him from coming back and playing football in the future and being decent, right? And so I'm wondering if, and again, it's a 1-year deal, so he might not even be with KC, but like he's not being talked about at all. I think people have soured on him a bit in general as a dynasty asset. So is there some opportunity to go buy this guy just no matter what? Like, does it even matter kind of what he does this year is where my head was at, right? And he's being valued like value adjacent wide receivers per Keep Trade Cut. We're talking about Alec Pierce, Andre Yoshivas, Juwan Jennings, Tyler Lockett. Value adjacent players overall, 25 third, Austin Eckler, Spencer Rattler, Theo Johnson, and again, Juwan Jennings. So it just like, I know Keep Trade Cut, but I wonder if he's a guy we should be targeting just because his value has become so low and we know that he's a better player than anything that I just said, like any single asset that I just spoke about,
Yes. If you're on a rebuilding team right now, I would absolutely, for those prices, you probably have a couple extra seconds, a couple extra thirds or whatever laid around in your path to the rebuild. I would absolutely go out and get Hollywood Brown on my team right now.
Okay, that's a good one.
Yep.
I think we have a couple more in here from the chat before we move on. And I'm trying to get some data for us. But okay, so we have Joe real quick. Oh, no, I'm sorry. Jake. This was Jake. Now that
Come
Braylon
on,
Allen's
Jake.
role
You could have been on
has
the show.
you may as well just be here. Now that Braylon Allen, you've talked enough in the chat to be here. Now that Braylon Allen's role has decreased, did you see enough before to want to buy in now? I think I've definitely seen enough to be like interested in him, but I don't.
Mhm.
I think his value is too high to be honest to buy. Like,
Yeah.
you're going to need to send something like a second round pick, or I mean, maybe if you could swap J.K. Dobbins for Braylon Allen plus like a fourth or something like that. Like, because he's obviously a starter or whatever. He's been having some successful weeks. Like, maybe you can do that. That's kind of a value adjacent player. But other than that, like it's I mean, if I could trade Tony Pollard for Braylon Allen plus, and you could do that for sure, like Braylon Allen plus like a third, maybe you can even swing it for a second with how well Tony Pollard's been playing. That I'd be willing to do, like kind of a tier down situation. Potentially the same thing with DeAndre Swift and getting a significant plus back. Those are kind of moves that I'd be willing to make, given the decrease in his role. The other one that Jake, we lost Uriah on the screen. Awesome. There you go. The last one that Jake has here, and this is a great one. JT Sanders' role has been expanding over the last 2 weeks as well.
Yes.
That's a really good shout. Absolutely nobody has this guy on their radar whatsoever. And I did talk about before in the season, like he's basically the tight end one there, and they don't have another one. So he's going to have some time to develop. They spent enough draft capital on him for that to happen. I think he just had like a 6-target, 6-catch game. So he's definitely trending up for them. And I'm not sure anybody is really noticing. So I think that's another one that you could target as well for sure.
Perfect.
I love those. That's a really good conversation. I think that in general, keeping in mind the oversaturation effect, I'll call it, and players that we just don't talk about, like keeping those things in the back of your head can really present some opportunities for you. So definitely keep that in mind as you go forward this season and beyond.
All right. Let's hit some trades before we get out of here.
Let's do that. And sorry, really quick before we hop in, just a couple things to clean up before we finish off, or just to say that I wanted to say. Sorry, I know we want to get out of here, but the tweet on Jackson, Smith, and Jigba, I'm just going to say 0% achieving an 18-plus point per game season, like range of outcomes. Like, I really don't like that language because there is not a 0% chance. It's a 0% chance based on the data set and historically what players with these similar milestones that they've hit within this time have done. But like, that's not fair. Like it's just not, it can't be 0%. Like he could be the outlier, right? And he could be a guy who, because of his specific contextual situation, is not hitting those milestones, but will hit them later. And so I don't love the framing of like 0% based on historical range of outcomes. Like it doesn't logically click with me very well. And so I don't love that. Just saying that. Anyway, moving on. Mark Andrews, real quick. We were talking about that. I did pull up his stats. This is per the Fantasy Points data suite, and I did weeks 5 through 7.
Mm-hmm.
So I gave it like 3 weeks, and his yards per route run were at 18. So two percentage points higher than what Jacob Gibbs had posted for the full season, which obviously is trending up. And his yards per route run are 1.85. And I assume that's honestly, I can go for the full season real quick and see, but I'm pretty sure that's going to be a trend up as well.
Yeah.
Let me just apply that real quick.
Kind of what we've seen, watching the games. It feels like if you want to take Mark Andrews, what he's done this year compared to years previous, it's kind of faulty, I think, to include the first couple weeks. Unless there were like weeks 1 through 7, all the years before, and what it looked like. I still don't even know if that's quite fair. I think it's kind of important to look at what he's done the last 3 weeks and then try to project forward. So.
Yep, and I want to make sure that this is right. Why is it? Sorry. but you're gonna bear with me. Let me just make sure. Oh, sorry. Okay. No, I was wrong. Okay. That actually was his season numbers. It's still even better. 0.25 targets per out run, weeks 5 through 7. It was 18 for the full season. So I'm not sure exactly where those numbers were coming from or what he was kind of any thresholds he was applying or whatever. But so it went up from 18 to 0.25 targets per out run in weeks 5 through 7, which again, it even better illustrates our point. And then the yards per route runner 3.18 in that time.
Yeah.
So yeah, he absolutely is on the right track, trending on the right track. I knew there was something off there when I was looking at it. So yes, I think we nailed it at the beginning, and I just wanted the data to back it up a little bit. And so I think that was all I had. Yeah, I think that's all I wanted to clean up before we do the dynasty trades.
Cool. Well, let's talk some trades. So we have Tyler Lockett getting set for third. Oh, Tyler Lockett and a third for a second and 2 fourths.
Yes, and so it was a 25 fourth, a 26 fourth, and I want to say it was a 25 second. This is DU2, I believe it was. And this was my trade. So what do you think about it?
I'd probably take Lockett in the third. Unless I'm like rebuilding, then I'll take the 3 seconds and call it good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So basically how this went down was I traded Gardner Minshew in a fourth for like Tyler Lockett and a couple other things like Josh Palmer and something else. I don't know. And so I felt like moving off of Lockett quickly for a second plus a couple fourths just was kind of good business. And like, I don't know if Tyler Lockett's going to be worth a second ever. So it was kind of like, all right, I'm going to tear down from my third round pick to 2 fourths, but I'm going to move Lockett for a second, which I don't think is going to be possible next year, you know?
Yeah.
So I think that it's actually a pretty fair trade, but I do think that the second is going to be more liquid, and that's kind of the side I'd fall on.
I like it. All right. Isaac Garindo for a 25 fourth.
Mid fourth.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's fine. It's what he cost to begin with. It's what he cost to begin with in your rookie drafts, basically.
Yeah.
I know he's probably on waivers in some leagues, but he ran so damn fast at the combine that he probably didn't make too many waivers. And with the fact that like any running back in San Francisco is good if they get the chance to start, it's worth the risk. But yeah, I don't mind it. If you're either getting out on Garindo for basically what you paid for him, or you're taking a shot on him when you couldn't have got him in the rookie draft, so it's fine.
I don't like anything about it, so like I don't know what. I'd probably take the fourth, I guess, just to re-roll the dice, even though Garindo looks okay. I don't know.
It's fine.
I'll take the fourth, but yeah, I don't think it's like terrible to go get Garindo for a fourth. Again, like you said, that's what he costs, and like you can't really buy him any lower than that. So, whatever.
All right. Trade I made today with Josh and DU2, Jameis Winston for 25 third. That person's third is currently 8th in the league right now.
Okay, so it's going to be potentially an early third.
Yeah.
All right.
I think it's cheap for Jameis because he's starting quarterback.
I do too. That's kind of where my brain went, is like he's a starter, so by Uriah logic, he's worth a first.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think you're obviously getting that. I think that maybe if he plays well enough, you can get a second for him, though. I think like if he plays well enough over the next couple of weeks, you could probably get a second. But
yeah, tanking.
This is fine. If you're, I was about to say, this is also fine if you're tanking and you don't want his points on your team and you want to just move on. Like,
yeah, I'll take
the little. Were you getting? Good.
I was gonna say I'll take a hit dynasty value a little bit just to kind of get those points off my. It's not a big deal. I could have shopped him around, but this offer was sent to me, and this was my counter, and yeah.
Yeah, again, I also think that considering it could be a early third, we're splitting hairs with like a second, and so like it's fine. Like I think it's fine business. Yeah, I'd probably go Winston side though if I had to make a decision, but I dig it. I dig the trade.
All right, Amari Cooper 4, Tank Dell in a 4th.
This got completed
live on the show in the chat.
Live on the show in the chat. We were hustling and we were talking. So I didn't see a good place for it to come up until the trade section. So this is a fun trade. Yes. I think this is fairly easily Dell in the 4th. I know that that Tank Dell hasn't had the season we wanted, but I think it's a little bit of the Mark Andrews syndrome, getting healthy, getting reacclimated, that whole thing. And Amari Cooper's been a tough asset to move off of. Everybody wants a first for him. Nobody's getting a first for him. So this is, to me, you're getting a first plus for him, really. Like, I think Dell is worth a first-round pick, and I think you're getting plus on top of that. So, yeah, I don't dislike it at all. And obviously the person getting Amari Cooper, he just scored a touchdown with the Bills. He's probably going to have a pretty damn good season down the stretch and got a couple more years probably with the Bills and a good quarterback. So I don't hate it for the Cooper side either, but I would take the Dell side. And knowing this trade, and it was Jake and Joe, I'd bet that Jake is like tanking of sorts. And so this also fits that build, basically hoping you're limiting your points a little bit there with Dell short term, but he's going to build back up. Plus you get an extra pick and you get off of Amari Cooper and his potential boom games that are coming.
That's exactly how I see it. You're going to trade for Cooper because you want those points, and if your situation where you're rebuilding like Jake probably is there, this is perfect. It's exactly what you're hoping to happen with Amari Cooper's first week there in Buffalo, that he showed that he's going to score points. Otherwise, he would be probably still sitting on that team. Like you said, it's kind of been a hard asset to move, and the stars aligned for him this week. So I like it. I like both sides for both reasons. I think it's fair.
Yeah, it is. It's a good trade. I love that they got it done live on the show. More people need to join live, and they can get trades done in the chat too. How about that?
Okay.
I got
catch
one
me in the
here
chat.
that I want.
How about that?
Hey, catch you in the chat. That's actually good. That's really good stuff.
How about that?
Okay, I wanted to finish this off real quick with a discussion around somebody we just spoke about middle of the show, Ben Winkler, really good friend of mine, good friend of the show. One of my favorite people in the community, really. Like, I think he's just got such a bright mind, especially when it comes to the film study side of things. But I thought this trade was super interesting. He posted it. It's a great day to be great. And I don't know which side he got, to be honest with you. But yeah, actually, I don't know which side he got. I assume the Thomas side.
Mm-hmm.
I'd assume it was the Thomas side of this. So what it was is Brian Thomas Jr., Ben Sinnott, and Dontavian Wicks for Bijan Robinson and Jacoby Myers. And I found this trade really, really interesting, especially, we were talking at the top of the show. I knew we were going to be talking about Brian Thomas Jr. and the whole nine. So which side of this deal, just to start there. And also no shade to Ben at all. I didn't actually talk to him about this before I brought it up on here, but whenever we bring this stuff up, like it's literally just like thought experiments and just thinking things through and talking things through. So no shade on whoever got any side of this deal. I'm interested in kind of how this went down and what your thoughts are on this draft.
We talked about Wicks. I still don't really care to have him on my team. Never did. I have like 78% Romeo dubs. Like, obviously, I'm not going to say anything nice about Wicks. But I like that he got Sinnott. We just talked about Sinnott as a guy that we want to try to get because nobody's talking about him, right? We're trying to get ahead of the curve there. And then Brian Thomas Jr., I think he's going to be, very startable for you for a very long time. The fact that you're able to move off of Jacoby Myers is good. But Bijan, it's hard not. I would have liked to get some other sort of running back over Wicks.
Mm-hmm.
Other than that, I think it's fine. But yeah, I don't know. Bijan looked really good last week, and if he keeps that up, like, you might be a little sad here. Because I think that probably for the remainder of the season, Bijan is going to score per game more than Wicks and Sinnott will combined.
I think that's a pretty reasonable breakdown of the trade. Just for some market valuation context, Brian Thomas Jr. is currently sitting at 22 overall in Dynasty per keep trade cut, wide receiver 9, directly behind AJ Brown and between Drake London and AJ Brown, and ahead of an early 25 first. So that value has skyrocketed to the moon. I just, this trade's really interesting to me. I think it's Bijan's side kind of like fairly easily, to be honest with you. And I'm shocked that somebody had to add Jacoby Myers to that side. Like, I don't quite get that part of it. Like, why did there need to be a plus on the the Bijan Robinson side when we're talking about Wicks and Sennett as the add-ons? They seem very low value assets, as much as these are players I like. Like, these are players that I have talked quite a bit about, and I do see a rise for Sennett coming, but I just think that gap between Bijan and Brian Thomas is going to be too great to cover with the Sennett and Wicks side. Maybe I'm completely undervaluing Brian Thomas, but I think that the market is overvaluing him a little bit, honestly, given where he's sitting in the keep trade cut sphere. So this trade just was very interesting to me and felt a little bit like what I was talking about earlier, some of that redraft mentality kind of stuff, where it's like, but even I'm saying that, and it's like Ben Sennett's in there, so obviously that's not like a redraft play, but it's like what Brian Thomas Jr. is offering now, like what Wicks is doing right now is like where this is based off of in terms of acquiring those players. And even though Bijan just had a good game, you're still having to add to Bijan, who is the top, 3 dynasty running back, to get to Brian Thomas. And so it's just hard to compute in my brain and make that all like even out and make sense to me. So, I think this is more about kind of being careful buying assets. We talked about buying high on assets before, but this is buying at like the highest level before you've seen the player fully kind of balance out, right? Like we're just seeing, I think I don't think Brian, it's hard because I do really think Brian Thomas will keep up some level of this production. I'm not saying that he won't, but it just seems like you're buying at the tip top and you're selling Bijan low.
Yeah.
Which you should try to be selling him at the tip top as well as buying Brian Thomas at the top. Like I think there was a way to get this trade done and it be more beneficial even for the Brian Thomas Jr. side, utilizing the boom week that we just saw from or the get right week, I'll say, we just saw from Bijan. So it's an interesting one, super interesting one. But I just think that there's some psychological aspects to it that involve the current valuation in the market that we could have exploited a little bit better as well.
Yeah,
that's all I got.
I agree. Yep. Yeah, I agree. All right. Anything else?
Not for this week. I mean, just keep chugging along. Be patient, everybody. I know it's a really tough season. The injuries are absolutely brutal. And that said, I really appreciate everybody in the YouTube chat. Jake, great show, boys. Toodles, really appreciate you showing up, even when you're not actually on the pod. Joe, I saw AJ in there. Probably missed somebody, but everybody appreciate y'all in the YouTube chat. Appreciate everybody in the Discord. Find your way to the Discord if you listen to us and you're not there yet. It's just a great place to find some knowledgeable individuals who think alike and just they have some really, really great advice in there. So hop in there with us and enjoy. Other than that, catch you next week. Take us out of here, Uriah.
All right. Well, thanks for giving us a listen again. Do all those things that Billy just said. And then you can follow us on Twitter if you choose to. Billy is at Willie Beeman FF. I'm at Uriah Dawkins. And Jake's at Jake Abrams. Other than that, you guys have a good night.
Peace out.
Peace out.